What would make a wife murder her own husband?
I witnessed Travis being attacked by two other individuals.
And what sort of demonic possession would make a mother kill her own child while keeping her glued to the wall?
I have a deeper connection with him than I've ever had with anyone in my life.
Uncover the chilling motives behind spousal killings and the terrifying forces that drive mothers to commit unthinkable acts.
I'm happily saying life in prison. If you had him, I would take that. I don't care.
Join us as we explore justice's response to women who shatter societal norms. Prepare for shocking revelations. Diana Lovejoy. Diana Lovejoy's murder case gripped the nation with its chilling tale of betrayal, deceit, and desperation. At its heart was a woman whose life spiraled into darkness, ultimately culminating in a shocking murder-for-hire plot against her estranged husband. Lovejoy's story began innocently enough, a tale of romance and marriage that soured over time. As her relationship with her husband, Greg Mulvihill, deteriorated, Lovejoy found herself embroiled in a bitter custody battle over their young son. But what started as a legal dispute soon escalated into something far more sinister. In a bid to regain custody of her child and rid herself of her husband, Lovejoy allegedly conspired with her firearms instructor, Weldon McDavid, to orchestrate a murder plot. The plan was simple yet horrifying. McDavid would ambush Greg and shoot him during a staged confrontation, where he faked a phone call through a burner phone telling Greg that he pretended to be an investigator, and told Greg on the phone he had evidence to prove molested and abuse his son and wife, and it was going to be used against him during the divorce proceedings. Of course, there was no such evidence. But Greg called his friend Jason Kovat to accompany him. They went to the address the caller asked him to go to, which is a pole along a dirty part of Aina Soledad. He was told the evidence would be dropped there. And of course there was no evidence, and it was all staged by McDavid and Lovejoy to kill Greg, which they succeeded. Lovejoy and McDavid were arrested and charged with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and assault with a deadly weapon. Throughout the trial, Lovejoy maintained her innocence, painting herself as a victim of circumstance caught in a web of lies spun by her co-conspirator. However, the prosecution presented a compelling case, including text messages and recorded conversations between Lovejoy and McDavid, which seemed to incriminate her beyond a reasonable doubt. As the trial reached its climax, all eyes were on Lovejoy as the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty. The word reverberated through the courtroom, signaling the end of Lovejoy's charade and the beginning of her reckoning. Her reaction to the verdict was a study in contrasts. Gone was the confident facade she had presented throughout the trial, replaced by a mask of shock and disbelief. Tears streamed down her face as the reality of her situation sank in. Then she did something very dramatic. She fainted and was rushed to the hospital. Well, that didn't reduce her 25-year to life imprisonment sentence. And for her accomplice McDavid, he got 26 years to life imprisonment sentence. For Lovejoy, the verdict marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, albeit one marked by incarceration and shame. As she was led away in handcuffs to begin her prison sentence, she left behind a trail of unanswered questions and shattered lives. What drove a once loving wife and mother to conspire to commit such a heinous act? Was it the desperation of a woman pushed to the brink, or something darker lurking beneath the surface? These questions may never be fully answered, lost to the depths of Lovejoy's troubled psyche. In the end, Diana Lovejoy's story serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the destructive power of unchecked emotions and the consequences of giving in to despair. Blair. What would make a mother murder her own children? Michelle gained infamy for the horrific abuse and murder of her two young children in Detroit, Michigan in 2015. Born on January 30, 1985, Blair's case shocked the nation and sparked widespread outrage. Blair's troubled history with child welfare authorities dates back years before the murders. She had a long record with Michigan's child welfare system, with reports of neglect and abuse involving her children. Despite multiple investigations and interventions by authorities, the abuse continued unchecked. On March 2015, the bodies of Blair's two children, Stoney Ann Blair, who was 13 years old, and Stephen Gage Barry, who was 9, were discovered in a deep freezer in her home. Autopsies revealed that both children had suffered from multiple injuries, including blunt force trauma and burns, indicating prolonged abuse and torture. Blair's arrest sent shockwaves through the community, prompting questions about how such atrocities could occur under the watch of child welfare agencies. It was revealed that Blair had isolated her children from the outside world, homeschooling them to conceal the abuse they endured. During her trial, Blair showed little remorse for her actions, claiming that she had killed her children because they were possessed by demons. She also alleged that her son had assaulted her younger daughter, although there was no evidence to support her claims. In 2015, Michelle Blair was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her case brought attention to the failures of the child welfare system and the importance of early intervention in cases of child abuse. The tragic deaths of Stoney Ann Blair and Stephen Gage Barry serve as a sobering reminder of the consequences of unchecked abuse and the need for greater vigilance in protecting vulnerable children from harm. While Michelle Blair will spend the rest of her life behind bars, the memory of her heinous crimes lives on as a cautionary tale of the darkest depths of human depravity. Elizabeth Escalona. In September 2011, Escalona was arrested after her then 2-year-old daughter, Jocelyn Cedillo, was found with severe injuries in their Dallas, Texas home. Cedillo had sustained multiple injuries, including brain damage, a fractured rib, and numerous cuts and bruises as a result of Escalona's abuse. Now, during the trial, it was revealed that Escalona had attacked her daughter in a fit of rage, using superglue to seal the child's eyes shut and brutally beating her with a belt, and glued her hands to the wall. The abuse left Cedillo in a coma for several days and with permanent disabilities. Escalona pleaded guilty to felony injury to a child and was sentenced to 99 years in prison, one of the harshest sentences ever handed down for child abuse in Texas. Escalona showed no reaction to the verdict and was led away in handcuffs. The judge presiding over the case described the abuse as pure evil and expressed hope that Escalona would spend the rest of her life behind bars. The case of Elizabeth Escalona served as a grim reminder of the horrors of child abuse and the devastating consequences of parental neglect and violence. It prompted calls for greater awareness and intervention to protect vulnerable children from harm and ensure that perpetrators of abuse are held accountable for their actions. Sandra Lane. In a suburban Detroit courtroom, a tragic case unfolded as 75-year-old Sandra Lane, a grandmother, was found guilty of second-degree murder for the murder of her 17-year-old grandson. The verdict, reached on the first full day of jury deliberations, dismissed Lane's claim of self-defense and also convicted her of using a firearm during a felony. She now faces a minimum of 14 years in prison. Upon hearing the verdict, Lane quietly shed tears while her defense attorney, Jerome Sabota, described her as devastated. However, the victim's mother, Jennifer Hoffman, referred to Lane as a monster and expressed relief that she would be imprisoned, stating, "I'm glad she's put away and can't do harm to anyone else." As Lane was being led out of court, some family members, including her 87-year-old husband, showed support, but her view was obstructed by a deputy. The incident occurred in May of last year at Lane's residence in West Bloomfield Township. A heated argument between Lane and her grandson, Jonathan Hoffman, escalated, leading Lane to fire 10 shots at him over a span of 6 minutes. 6 of the shots struck Hoffman, resulting in his death. While Lane never denied killing her grandson, she contended that she acted out of fear for her safety after he had assaulted her. The jury had the option to consider first-degree murder charges or lesser charges, or they could have acquitted Lane based on her self-defense argument. A critical piece of evidence presented during the trial was a recording of Hoffman's desperate call to 911, where he pleaded for help while additional shots were fired. Gasping for air, he informed the dispatcher, "My grandma shot me. I'm going to die. Help. I got shot again." The jury, in a private meeting with the prosecutor and Lane's attorneys, later revealed that the 911 call played a pivotal role in their decision-making process. They noted the absence of any signs of a struggle during the call. Following the verdict, the jurors declined to comment publicly. However, according to prosecutor Paul Walton, they had emphasized the significance of the 911 call and disclosed that they had replayed it multiple times during their deliberations. Walton also highlighted Lane's lack of urgency in seeking medical assistance for her grandson after the shooting. Lane had claimed to fear him, yet she did not promptly leave the house or call for an ambulance. Walton argued that Lane's actions contradicted her self-defense narrative. He pointed out that she never reported the alleged assault to the police and that a hospital examination conducted after her arrest revealed no injuries, with Lane even speaking affectionately about Hoffman to a nurse. During his closing argument, Sabata implored the jury to empathize with Lane, a woman in her 70s, and to consider the challenging circumstances she faced. He painted a picture of Lane caring for a troubled teenager who engaged in drug use and brought strangers into their home. Hoffman's parents were residing in Arizona at the time, attending to their daughter who was undergoing treatment for a brain tumor. Sabata urged the jury to imagine the adrenaline coursing through Lane's veins, asserting that she acted in a moment of panic. In the end, the jury sided with the prosecution. Lane's conviction for second-degree murder reflects their rejection of her self-defense claim. As this tragic case concludes, the community grapples with the loss of a young life and the complex dynamics that led to such a devastating outcome. Granny was really a monster. Do you think she deserved more than the 14 years minimum sentencing? Jodi Arias. Jodi Arias's case is a gripping tale of obsession, manipulation, and violence that captivated audiences worldwide. Born on July 9 through 1980 in Salinas, California, Arias rose to infamy for her role in the brutal murder of her ex-boyfriend, Travis Alexander, in 2008. The relationship between Arias and Alexander was tumultuous, marked by passion and volatility. After their breakup, Arias moved to Mesa, Arizona, but continued to maintain contact with Alexander. On June 4, 2008, Alexander was found dead in his home, brutally murdered. Initially, Arias denied any involvement in the crime, claiming she was not present at the scene. However, as evidence mounted against her, including forensic evidence and contradictory statements, Arias changed her story multiple times. She eventually confessed to killing Alexander, but claimed it was in self-defense, alleging that he had abused her both physically and emotionally. Throughout the highly publicized trial, Arias's demeanor and behavior drew widespread attention. From her stoic composure in court to her bizarre interviews with the media, Arias's actions only added to the intrigue surrounding the case. The trial became a spectacle, with millions tuning in to watch the proceedings unfold. In 2013, after months of deliberation, the jury found Arias guilty of first-degree murder. However, they were unable to reach a unanimous decision on whether to sentence her to life in prison or the death penalty, resulting in a mistrial. A retrial for the sentencing phase ensued, during which Arias's defense team attempted to portray her as a victim of abuse and mental illness. Ultimately, Arias was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2015. What was her reaction? Well, in her words, she said, "I felt betrayed, actually, by the jury. I was hoping they would see things for what they are. I felt really awful for my family and what they were thinking." Her case continues to be a subject of fascination for true crime enthusiasts, sparking debates about the nature of justice, the complexities of human behavior, and the allure of forbidden desires. As Jodi Arias languishes behind bars, her story serves as a stark reminder of the destructive power of obsession and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. Whether viewed as a villain or a victim, her legacy is etched in the annals of true crime history, a cautionary tale of love gone wrong and the darkness that lies within us all. Shaina Huber, a woman who gained notoriety for the murder of her boyfriend, Ryan Poston, in 2012. Born on February 21, 1991, Huber was raised in Kentucky and attended college at the University of Kentucky. The relationship between Huber and Poston was tumultuous, with reports of arguments and tensions between the couple. On October 12, 2012, Huber shot Poston 6 times inside his condominium in Highland Heights, Kentucky. She later claimed that the shooting was an act of self-defense, alleging that Poston had become physically and emotionally abusive towards her. However, evidence presented during the trial painted a different picture. Prosecutors argued that the killing was premeditated, citing Huber's behavior before and after the shooting. They alleged that Huber had a history of manipulation and possessiveness towards Poston, and that she had deliberately planned to kill him after their relationship went sour. During the trial, Huber's own words proved damning, as recordings of her conversations with police officers and friends revealed callous and incriminating statements about the shooting. In one recording, she was heard saying, "I gave him his nose job he always wanted," referring to shooting Poston in the face. In April 2015, Shaina Huber was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum of 20 years. However, in 2018, her conviction was overturned due to juror misconduct, and a retrial was ordered. In the retrial in 2018, Huber was once again found guilty of murder and received the same sentence of life in prison. Huber leaned over in her chair and wept into the lap of her attorney Zachary Walden before the verdict was read. The case of Shaina Huber continues to be a subject of fascination for true crime enthusiasts, as it raises questions about the dynamics of abusive relationships, the nature of self-defense claims, and the pursuit of justice in cases of intimate partner violence. Shelby Isaac. In a tragic and harrowing case that shook the community, 19-year-old Shelby Isaac was convicted for the brutal killings of a pregnant woman, a man, and an unborn child at the Sycamore Lake Apartments. The trial gripped the attention of the public, revealing a chilling tale of betrayal and violence. The courtroom was tense as Shelby Isaac, accompanied by her defense attorney Lauren Fuchs, awaited the verdict. The weight of the charges hung heavily in the air, and the anticipation was palpable. As Judge James Lammy began reading the guilty counts of second-degree murder, Isaac's world shattered. Overwhelmed with emotion, she collapsed, her cries of "Mommy" echoing through the room, piercing the hearts of all who heard them. The prosecution had presented a compelling case, arguing that Isaac had orchestrated the murders during a hair weave robbery. It was alleged that Isaac had met with the victims, Eddie Tate II and Edwina Thomas, under the pretense of buying hair weaves but had ulterior motives. Prosecutors painted a picture of Isaac luring Tate to his death, opening fire on the car where he sat with his pregnant girlfriend. Throughout the trial, emotions ran high. The victims' families grieved openly, their pain and loss evident in every tear shed. Gloria Tate, Eddie's mother, spoke of the void left by her son's absence. The courtroom reverberated with the raw anguish of a mother robbed of her child. The tragedy had forever altered their lives, leaving an indelible scar that could never fully heal. Isaac's defense attorney, Lauren Fuchs, mounted a vigorous defense, questioning the evidence and the credibility of the prosecution's key witness, Victoria C.A. Fuchs argued that there was no physical evidence connecting Isaac to the crime scene and pointed out inconsistencies in C.A.'s testimony. The defense maintained that Isaac had no prior criminal record and suggested that the fingerprint found in Tate's car had been left during a previous encounter when Isaac purchased hair weaves. The trial became a battle between narratives, a clash of opposing perspectives seeking to shape the truth. The jury had the weighty task of determining Isaac's fate, deliberating over the evidence presented before them. Ultimately, they delivered their verdict, holding Isaac accountable for the murders she had been charged with. As the sentencing date approached, the community braced for the final chapter in this tragic saga. On a somber day in the courtroom, Judge James Lammy handed down a 30-year sentence to Shelby Isaac. The gravity of her actions weighed heavily upon her as she sat quietly, her head bowed in remorse. The case of Shelby Isaac serves as a chilling reminder of the depths to which human actions can sink. It is a tale of shattered lives, irrevocable loss, and the devastating consequences of greed and betrayal. Now, it's time for today's subscriber pick. In the hushed courtroom, the judge's words hung heavy in the air, delivering the damning verdict that sealed the fate of the 3 women before him. Guilty. The word echoed like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through the room. Yet, as the weight of their crimes was laid bare for all to see, the women remained eerily composed, their expressions unreadable, betraying no hint of remorse or regret. It was as if they had resigned themselves to their fate, accepting the consequences of their actions with a chilling indifference. For those who bore witness to the trial, it was a sobering reminder of the darkness that lurks within us all, capable of driving even the most outwardly ordinary individuals to commit unspeakable acts. And as the gavel fell, sealing their fate with the sentence of life behind bars, there was no denying that justice had been served. Yet, amidst the solemnity of the moment, one couldn't help but wonder what demons had led these women down such a dark and twisted path, and whether redemption was ever truly beyond their reach. What do you think about this image? Let us know in the comment section. Tatiana Fari. In a case that shocked the nation, Tatiana Fari, a Michigan mother, has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of her 10-month-old daughter, Mary Welch. The courtroom was filled with tension as Kent County Judge Paul Denefeld delivered the verdict, marking the tragic end to a harrowing tale of abuse, desperation, and unimaginable loss. The trial had captured the attention of the public, drawing millions of views to a video capturing the initial reaction of Fari and her husband, Seth Welch, when they were charged. Welch stood in stunned silence, his mouth agape, upon learning that he too faced life in prison without parole, while Fari wept openly. The video became a haunting symbol of the profound impact this case had on all involved. The jury's decision came after Fari's conviction on charges of first-degree murder and first-degree child abuse. The court also sentenced her to 15 to 30 years on the child abuse charge, to be served concurrently with the life sentence. Fari was ordered to pay all fines and court costs. Throughout the trial, Fari's defense attorney, Damian Nunzio, argued that his client had been a victim of years of abuse at the hands of her husband. He painted a picture of a woman trapped in a cycle of violence and terror, unable to protect herself or her child. Fari testified that Welch had subjected her to physical and sexual abuse, even attempting an exorcism on her during her pregnancy with their youngest child. The defense contended that the abuse had left Fari mentally and emotionally broken, rendering her unable to care for her child properly. The prosecution presented a different narrative, highlighting the autopsy report that revealed Mary's cause of death as malnutrition and dehydration. Prosecutors alleged that Fari had failed to feed the infant for days, resulting in her tragic demise. Despite Fari's claims of having fed and nursed Marie, the evidence painted a starkly different reality. The sentencing hearing was a somber affair, with Judge Denefeld expressing his deep sorrow and confusion over the actions of the parents. He lamented the tragic fate that had befallen Mary, a child who had suffered unimaginably at the hands of those who should have protected her. Denefeld's words echoed the sentiments of the community, grappling with the unfathomable depths of neglect and cruelty that led to this heartbreaking outcome. The case of Tatiana Fari serves as a powerful reminder of the devastating consequences of abuse and the urgency to protect the most vulnerable among us. The loss of Mary Welch will forever serve as a painful reminder of the urgent need to address domestic violence, protect innocent lives, and strive for a society where no child suffers such a tragic fate. Vonda Starr Smith. In a heartbreaking case that unfolded in Greene County, Tennessee, Vonda Starr Smith, a resident of Afton, has been sentenced to life in prison for her involvement in the death of a 21-year-old pregnant woman in 2016. Smith was found guilty of first-degree murder in the killing of the young woman and second-degree murder for the death of her unborn child. The judge handed down a life sentence for the first-degree murder charge and a maximum of 25 years for the second-degree murder charge. Prosecutors revealed that Jessie Morrison, the victim, died from blunt force trauma, and since she was pregnant at the time, Smith faced an additional murder charge for the death of the unborn child. The tragic discovery of Morrison's body on August 12, 2016, near Judd Neal Loop in Afton sent shockwaves through the community. During the sentencing, Judge John Duggar, Jr. carefully considered the mitigating and enhancement factors presented by Smith's attorney, Gene Scott, as well as the state's arguments. Scott appealed for the minimum sentence of 15 years for the second-degree murder charge, emphasizing Smith's limited criminal record, which included a 1993 conviction for writing worthless checks. He also highlighted her long-term employment at the same job for 28 years. Several witnesses who knew Smith testified in her defense, describing her as a good person. But Judge Duggar took into account several crucial factors when determining Smith's sentence. He noted the vulnerability of the victim, a fetus due to its age, and the use of a deadly weapon in the form of blunt force trauma that caused Morrison's death. The judge expressed that Smith had violated Morrison's trust by getting into her car shortly before the murder. He remarked on the tragic consequences of that trust being shattered, saying, "You all were all there together, and she trusted being with you, as opposed to being with a stranger, and bad things happened. This murder happened after that." Consequently, Judge Duggar sentenced Smith to life in prison for first-degree murder and imposed the maximum sentence for second-degree murder. He emphasized that she would effectively spend the rest of her life behind bars and be recognized as an infamous convicted felon. In an emotional moment after the sentencing, Tammy Morrison, Jessie's mother, addressed the court. She expressed the irreplaceable loss she felt as a mother and shared the heartache of knowing that her daughter would never see her grandchild. The sentencing provided some closure, but Tammy Morrison acknowledged that no amount of justice could bring her daughter back. The tragic case of Vonda Starr Smith and the death of Jessie Morrison serve as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of violence and betrayal. The community mourns the loss of a young life and an unborn child, while grappling with the profound anguish experienced by the victims' loved ones. Erica Mae Butt and Shanita Latrice Cunningham. The case involving Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham is a tragic and disturbing one that unfolded in South Carolina in 2011. Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham were both charged in connection with the death of Butts' 3-year-old daughter, Serenity Richardson. Serenity Richardson died in 2011 from blunt force trauma to her abdomen, which caused internal bleeding. The details that emerged during the investigation were horrifying. Serenity's body showed signs of extensive abuse, including broken ribs and other injuries indicating repeated physical assault over a period of time. Both Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham were arrested and charged with homicide by child abuse. Authorities believed that both women had been responsible for subjecting Serenity to the sustained abuse that ultimately led to her death. During the trial, it was revealed that Butts and Cunningham had subjected Serenity to brutal beatings and other forms of abuse over an extended period. The prosecution painted a picture of a young child subjected to unimaginable suffering at the hands of those who should have protected her. In 2013, Erica Mae Butts pleaded guilty to homicide by child abuse and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Shanita Latrice Cunningham also pleaded guilty and received a sentence of 20 years in prison. The case of Serenity Richardson's murder sent shockwaves through the community and sparked outrage across the nation. It served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of children and the importance of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. While the legal proceedings have brought some measure of justice for Serenity, her tragic death stands as a heartbreaking example of the consequences of child abuse and neglect. It serves as a call to action for society to be vigilant in protecting the most vulnerable among us and to ensure that those who harm innocent children are held accountable for their actions. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.